pathways, careers pathways in music and the arts. My name is Lorraine Bodley, and I'm delighted to welcome back so many of our past students, because we wanted to create a panel where people who had come through different courses in Maynooth could speak about their own experience and how they forged careers in different areas. I'm not going to introduce each speaker because they'll introduce themselves. I'll just introduce by name and profession. So beside me is Barbara Dignam. Barbara is one of our graduates, read her PhD here, and she is now working in DCU. And we have Ruth Kielty then, who is marketing and PR executive at the National Concert Hall and the Symphony Orchestra. And then we have Akash Murthy, who's an audio programmer, and Conor Power, who is working in UCD as a lecturer in UCD, graduate here, worked with Chris on film music. And then we have Dean Fagan, who is a media composer, and he also is a specialist in royalties and rights. And then Aisling Kenny, who is a graduate of our programmes and was my first doctoral student, and is a professional singer. So I thought we would start with Barbara. Barbara, would you like to tell us something about your individual experience and the challenges of obtaining a permanent post, post-PhD, and also about the kind of professional opportunities that come through being a scholar and an academic?
Thanks, Lorraine, and thanks so much for the kind invitation to join this wonderful panel. Any excuse to come back to Maynooth. Yes, so I'm an assistant professor in music in the School of Theology, Philosophy and Music in DCU. When I was thinking about what I might speak about today and looking back over the course of my journey, I guess what I'd say is that my career path has been neither a neat nor a linear one. Paul McCartney, The Long and Winding Road, started to pop into my head as I was going through this, and I was jotting down some notes here. But when I arrived in Maynooth as a master's student, I already knew that I wanted to work in the higher education context. So I was lucky in that sense that I knew where I really wanted to be. And as I engaged more with contemporary music and with digital technologies on what was then the Masters in Computer Music and Music Technology, I knew that that's where I wanted to situate myself and my research. So when I graduated with my PhD in 2010, we graduated the same day along with Jenny O'Connor, I think, from Sing Ireland. We all graduated on the same day. It wasn't the best time to be coming into the academic job market because I suppose the country was still reeling from the economic crash, and as colleagues in the room will attest, higher education was hit quite hard. There was, in terms of lectureships, there were no full-time permanent positions at the time. Occasional lecturing was sometime available, sometimes it wasn't. Postdocs were short-term or they were dependent on funding, and a lot of the time the funding just ran out simply because of the context. But that said, there were opportunities to be had, and my goal was very simple at that point in time. My goal was to just be ready. And in order to be ready, I needed to keep myself visible within the discipline. So I was attending, the SMI conferences, other conferences, trying to speak to people about my research, trying to kind of get the message about who I was as an academic out there. And also, I suppose, to try and keep myself professionally engaged in the higher education context in whatever shape or form that arose. And that was not, that was messy. It was challenging, and it certainly wasn't straightforward. So the thing was that I was trying to build on what I was gaining, the knowledge and experience that I was gaining over the course of the Masters and the PhD. So while I was here in Maynooth, I was gaining kind of discipline knowledge and contextual knowledge, because I was working as a teaching assistant, as a tutor in keyboard skills, and then later on I was lecturing in digital audio recording, in electroacoustic composition, in all of these areas that I wanted to be in. And then I was able to draw on that then in those post-COVID years. And obviously I also had built up a good rapport with colleagues that I still value to this day. It's great to see so many old colleagues here. And, you know, I drew on that support as well and the advice that those people were giving me over those years. And I was very lucky at the time that I was able to secure either, occasional lecturing or specified purpose contracts. But of course, none of them came with any kind of security. And each time, of course, the contract ceased. There was that sense of loss. There was that sense of uncertainty. But there was also great learning during that time as well. And looking back now, I'm realising that flux actually really prepared me. I became more resilient. I was building my own research profile, my own academic identity, my own professional identity as well. And I was building that rapport with colleagues, and I was getting kind of the message, as I say, out about who I was and what it was I wanted to be doing. So there was a lot of learning, but it wasn't easy. For a period, I was working in a number of different institutions at the same time. At one stage, I was working between here, Trinity College, and TU Dublin at the same time. So you're juggling. There's a lot of travelling. You're trying to juggle your finances, your relationships, your family at the same time. But as I say, that built that sense of resilience and that preparedness and that readiness for the next phase of my journey, which I suppose I would call not the messy part, but maybe the adjacent part. And what I mean by that is, when I was here between 2012 and 14, I was on a full-time contract here in Maynooth. I invested heavily at that point in my professional development. And I completed a postgraduate diploma in higher education. And that then allowed me, when out of the blue, I was offered a postdoc position on a teaching and learning project that was funded by the National Forum. I was ready for that. I had those skills. Now it's what I suppose I would call now discipline adjacent. It wasn't in my discipline, but I was able to draw on the skills that I had learned when I was working here. And then I was building this other network of people and these other contacts that I was able to then draw on when I was offered a post in UCD in 2018 as an assistant professor in educational development. Now, that might seem like, wait a minute, she wants to be in musicology and she's going down this route. But actually that post allowed me, because I was developing a new course called Teaching Across Cultures, it actually allowed me to bring all of that discipline and that adjacent knowledge together in terms of music, culture, teaching and learning, digital technology. So whilst I wasn't working directly in musicology at that point, I was still in that kind of, still in that dialogue. And I learned a lot when I was in UCD about the context, about the inner workings of HEIs, all of these sorts of things. And so the important point, though, to make about my time in UCD was I didn't lose sight of where I wanted to be. So whilst I was working there in this adjacent area, I was still working with musicology on the side. I was still attending those conferences. I was chairing the Brian Boydell Centenary Conference that turned into a book. I was still trying to do that on the side. And so when I suppose I interviewed for my current post in 2019, I had a very interesting and unique story to tell about how the discipline and the adjacent experiences shaped and formed me and my approaches and my my perspectives on teaching and research and scholarship and mentorship and all of these areas. So I suppose that the message is that it might not be straightforward. It might be this kind of non-linear path, but there's great learning to be had, and you can always change the narrative and the story as you go along.
Yeah, there's many things to take from that, Barbara, and I will come back to you, on some of those points. But just to link in with other people, navigating the uncertainty is something that everybody has had on the panel in their own individual ways, and also how things that we do add up. Up in time, and we see the relevance of them later on, and also how we have to juggle many different roles, like the public perception of an academic in the long holidays.
Yes.
People don't know that you either perform or you write or you compose. Also that the academic year isn't typically, just October to May, because there's postgraduate work and doctoral supervisions and masters submissions. But Dean, if we come to you next, because you have, in a different way, you're balancing two careers, because you're a specialist in performance rights and you're also a media composer. So would you like to tell us about your journey and also how you navigate the demands of two complementary but different professions?
Yeah, so as Lorraine said, I do balance two careers. I work as a royalties and rights specialist. I'm the head of royalties for Sofer & Co, which is a large accountancy firm over in London. I'm still based here. And I'm also a media composer, where I write for production libraries and publishers around the world, and they then sync my music to TV, trailers and film. Where I started was here, actually started with Conor beside me in the same course. BMO students in 2015, graduated in 2018. I came to Maynooth wanting to be a film composer essentially. That still came to fruition, because you'll realise if you want to do film composition is an extremely difficult field to get into. I write for TV but not directly score films anymore. So it's still, like Barb said, it's kind of the same thing, just slightly adjacent to it. After Maynooth, I went to Dublin and studied a diploma and specialised in music business for a year. And from there I was basically handpicked for the job that I'm still in now. As Lorraine said, my job is in salary jobs, sort of in the business side, is extremely niche, very, very niche, all to do with rights and royalties across record labels, music publishers, songwriters, producers, and I deal with all sorts of people in the music industry, and some very, very large artists, and helping them take care of their royalties essentially. But I do different jobs, from helping people sell catalogues. I've helped sell a catalogue for £42 million before. Help people collect royalties. We've collected multiple six-figure sums getting songwriters and artists our royalties back essentially as well. So there's a big balance of legal work as well in my job, sort of music legality of reading contracts, making sure people are being reported correctly, being treated correctly within the industry. And both of them can actually complement each other, that job and my job as a composer as well, because I'm able to protect myself essentially and my own royalties and my own writing. But yeah, there's a lot of balance involved. My day to day is basically 8:30 in the morning till probably 5:30 in the evening. A bit of relaxing in between, and then start again at 9:30 at night till around probably 1 in the morning, writing music then, and rinse and repeat probably 6 days a week essentially. Try to give myself the one day off where I can. But it's not easy. But if you want to do something, you you put the head down and you decide to do it. Realistically, but it's a lot of hard work, and as Barbara says, there's a lot of figuring out along the way. My aim was, after Maynooth, that I'm going to work in the music industry. That was my aim. How I got there, I wasn't fully sure, but that was the aim. And I always tell people that I've given a few talks, especially back in my old school and stuff. And I always say to people, I don't think anyone's parent really maybe tell them to go study music as a career choice to an extent, or as a degree choice. But I was always determined that I wanted to do, and to be honest, I believe if you put your head down to something and you want to do something, you will get there in some aspect in the end. Even if it's not exactly where you want to go, you treat it as a foot in the door to begin with, and then you eventually will get to where you want to go in the end. And that's kind of how I've ended up with both of my careers to an extent. And it just so happened that they both actually benefit each other quite a lot. But it takes a lot of hard work, and as Barbara said, my two jobs are kind of adjacent to what I would have learned here, where you kind of have to, if you trace back to stuff, you'll still paint a picture of what certain aspects of what you would have learned along the way will still come into your daily working life now, or how you got to that daily working life now. be surprised what writing one assignment can do to you when you start having to write probably 10 to 50 emails a day and you're suddenly used to writing a lot of words and actually dealing with people. It does help. You will find how it actually tracks back to itself in some regard. But yeah, they're kind of both of my careers essentially. Heading up to Royalties on that side and all the rights, and then writing music for TV. So I've been very lucky.
Which came first, you know, it was...
The writing came first.
Yeah.
The writing came first. I would have been writing music before I even came to Maynooth, with the aim of film composition in mind, and doing a lot learning about myself. And then look, I majored in composition while I was here, and I got to write for real performers and tours here, and still kept up with... I got to write music essentially, which still kept me writing. Now it's very different to the music I've been writing outside of Maynooth, but regardless, writing is writing. You're still keeping your ideas fresh. You're still learning how to orchestrate, learning to write for real players while they're here. Then outside I was learning how to write MIDI and do the opposite side. But again, they both complement each other. The business side kind of came after Maynooth, and because I was just hell-bent on wanting to work in the industry essentially, that's how that kind of came about. And as I said, I've been lucky enough to where I kept writing, and I've been lucky enough to work on some big projects over the years. My music's been used on Discovery Channel, WWE, Nickelodeon, BBC, loads of stuff around the world. But the writing would have came first, and the industry stuff came second. Yeah,
and was it very conscious? I will come back to you for questions, but was it a very conscious decision? Because so few composers can just compose all the time, you know, and have to have, you know, a second.
It was conscious. Like, it's the brutal truth is to make a living as a composer is not impossible, but to an extent can be a bit unrealistic. And to be as real as possible. In the past 2 years, my music has, between streaming softwares and TV, has been played over 60 million times. That still doesn't pay my bills. Well, it pays some, but it doesn't pay my whole life off. It doesn't pay my salary. I still have a job, lucky enough, a job within the industry that I love and really enjoy, and they both complement each other. But that sole income doesn't cover everything. So it was realising, okay, I don't want to stop writing music. I still want to write music. I love doing it, and I'm doing well doing it. But I still need to find my path and what I'll also enjoy, and that will actually keep me working essentially.
Yeah, because even with the canoeists, you know, with the Arts Council, it's a very small stipend. It's wonderful that it's there, but realistically, it's not enough to live off. It's a wonderful starting point, but not permanent. Ashley, if I come to you next, because to link with Barbara, like you've had a very unusual and exciting career, because you were just out of here in Maynooth, and you landed a full-time job at a challenging time. In Dundalk, and worked as an academic and organised a conference and on an international conference here in Maynooth on women in music, the 19th century lead, and published on this, and then decided, you know, that you were going to follow what you felt, you know, was your calling and your real passion, and to forge a career as a singer, which I admire you so much for. It's such a brave thing to do, to give up a position that people are scrambling to get, you know, and to live as you want to live. So would you like to tell us about your pathway from there?
Yeah, sure, Lorraine, thanks so much. And I remember discussions with you around the time. It was difficult. I just recall that now at the time, telling you what I was planning on doing. I suppose if I backtrack a little bit, you know, I sat here for music lectures 20 years ago now, and I had the time of my life studying music here in Maynooth. It was amazing. I didn't know much. I had an amazing music teacher. I didn't know much about the music industry or community or anything. I came very green. I did a little bit of experience of singing in choirs in Galway and playing piano. I had a really good piano teacher. And came here, and it was just like curtains opening gradually. So I loved the choirs, I loved performance, I loved attending concerts, I loved being close to Dublin. I'm from Galway, and back then there was a classical music scene, but not so much happening. So the first time I heard an orchestra was up here when I went in with friends on the train. Like when I was about 20, and so it was really just the most amazing eye-opening time. At the same time, found myself liking academics, liking academic study, analysis, musicology, had really inspiring lectures. I remember sitting in this room just being blown away by Martin O'Leary's lectures on Mahler and Lorraine's lectures on Schubert, and it was just like so exciting, and I enjoyed every moment, and I really loved the idea of being a lecturer, and the sharing of knowledge and those moments of kind of just eye-opening. And so I was kind of focused on wanting to be a lecturer, and very green, I said to Lorraine I'd like to be a lecturer, and ended up doing a PhD dissertation with Lorraine on women and the lead, and one composer in particular, Josephina Lang, and that was a period of immense growth and development, and in hindsight it has opened so many doors for me. At the same time, the singing was always there. I just loved the feeling of it. I just knew it was such a lovely feeling to be singing in beautiful buildings, and I ended up, it was on the kind of a parallel track the whole way. I ended up singing in Christchurch Cathedral, which is one of the few opportunities to sing professionally in choirs in Dublin. So I ended up singing there. Then I joined Resurgam, one of the few vocal professional ensembles here, and later on I ended up joining Chamber Choir Ireland, but that came a bit later. So my mind was just being a bit, we were getting to collaborate with professional musicians, and in addition to my path as an academic, that world was just being open to me as well, parallel, and I was studying with Mary Brennan, who was a wonderful teacher. Anyways, I'm kind of a bit all or nothing, so I was ploughing everything into academia. I was lucky enough to land that job in Dundalk, but after 2 years of hard graft, I tutored here in the department, I lectured in St. Pat's with John O'Flynn, and I was available for hours, and I just took whatever they gave me, and I loved it, loved working with students, and I was teaching singing in a few schools, and eventually landed my job in Dundalk, and that was an amazing time. I was there for 3 years. They knew I liked singing, and I got to teach some of that area in addition to analysis. Now, I don't know if any of you, in music departments you need to be quite broad in your skills and what you can teach, and in Dundalk we were teaching everything on the curriculum as well. So I was teaching composition, contemporary music in Ireland, contemporary European history of music, analysis from basically Renaissance up to the present day. We were teaching everything. So I really enjoyed it, but I loved certain aspects. I loved teaching analysis of song. I loved teaching the vocal classes I gave. And if I was to look at my life as a kind of a pie chart, I was like really happy with, say, 40% of like what I was doing, and the other half I loved. But I was like, maybe for success for me is really if I could get that number up to around 80. And I knew I wanted to explore the singing, and I went on a couple of master classes in Finland with Evelyn Tubb. And I've been so lucky to have amazing mentors. I've been so really gifted in my life to have really good mentors in the various fields I've worked with. So Evelyn was a really dear mentor to me, and I said, I'm thinking of going back and studying singing. And she says, come to me for lessons, and I prepared for the audition, and I got it. So I got a place in Schola Cantorum Basiliensis, this centre for early music in Switzerland. Amazing conservatoire of early music, really closely linked with research. All the professors there research is so embedded in what they do. So anyways, and she was so blunt, like she was great, and she just said, you mightn't have a career after this, but she says, I really admire you for doing it, and let's see what happens. And I knew then I was going to give 2 years of my life to it, and then I might go back into teaching after, but I knew I needed to explore that side of myself, and I just had the most amazing 2 years, meeting people from all over the world, meeting amazing musicians and artists, and just getting to like breathe the same air as them and just absorb all this knowledge and work on projects. It was really, really good masters. In fact, you got to work with the staff in like professional projects. So there was a week we were doing, with Bruce Dickey, who was a cornet player, and you'd just be doing a week-long project with him as director. So you weren't paid, but it was basically like a professional project. So we had lots of that. Also got to do stuff with forte piano, some of the leader I'd done on Josephina Lang, and hearing and performing the music as on the instruments as they were written for, I found really rewarding. And anyways, I did the 2 years there, and I was really lucky then to just start getting some opportunities, I got a position in Chamber Choir Ireland. I also, Irish Baroque Orchestra was beginning, well, it was always a fantastic ensemble, but was beginning to do more vocal works, and I encountered Peter Whelan, who's the artistic director of Irish Baroque Orchestra, and I've been lucky to collaborate with them as a soloist and ensemble singer now for the last 8 years. I'm also involved with them in the last 2 years as a choir fixer is my title. That's where I engage singers from both the soloists and ensemble singers, and often that our group performs that you're in the ensemble and you step out and do a solo. So I've been involved in that side of things. But I suppose if it's been really challenging, you know, there's still technical things I'm working on, but if I had to give it up tomorrow, I don't have any regrets about exploring singing. I feel it's just like the doctoral research helped me grow, the singing has also really helped me grow as a person. Really, you should take a long, hard look at yourself in the mirror. You know, it's really been a time of growth and development. And I haven't ruled out going back into teaching now. I've just been lucky that I've got in with some really good groups, Collegium Vocale Ghent. That was a big turning point, this Belgian group directed by Philippe Herreweghe. Very inspiring. I've got to sing in the big ensemble, but also the small Baroque ensemble, and do solos with those. And I've just learned so much. And now I have to share that I'm at the point of maybe moving away from big choir and seeking a bit more autonomy and agency. So I've applied to the Arts Council for funding. I've been successful with a few projects. I've done a project with 5 singers and harp, and I feel like I'd like to start exploring now my own projects, having a bit of agency and autonomy, in addition to doing my auditions and being engaged by other groups to do solos. So I feel, I'm just kind of ready for more new challenges, you know, at this stage.
Thank you so much, Ashley. I'm going to come to Ruth next, because Ruth is the kind of person behind the scenes, you know, who facilitates concerts and artists like you. Ruth works in the National Concert Hall and in an administrative, a senior administrative position. So will you tell us about your pathway from Maynooth into your position, and perhaps what your typical day looks like, or your job entails?
Yeah, absolutely, and thank you so much for having me. I similar to what the others said, but I thoroughly enjoyed my time studying at Maynooth, so it's really nostalgic, and it's lovely to be back strolling around the campus. It's such a beautiful campus. It's lovely to be back. And I think when I started studying music, when I look back at kind of where it all started, I actually think I started volunteering as a teen in a local arts festival. And during that time, just in the box office selling tickets, and I set up their Instagram account, and I just kind of started dipping my toe and making posters. And I kind of think that's where my interest in marketing came from, and particularly arts marketing and music marketing. And so I came to Maynooth and I studied music and French, my Bachelor of Arts. And then following that, I did my Masters in Management at Trinity College Dublin. And during that time, I focused my thesis on the strategic development of Irish arts organisations. So, and even actually, it's one thing that someone said to me way back when. They said, if you know what you want to do, focus your thesis on it, because when you're in interviews, even if you don't go into, you know, education or research, when you're in interviews, it's just like this, like, breadth of information that you can just talk about, and it's something that you've specialised in so closely. So then, following studying at Trinity, I got a job with Irish National Opera, and I worked as a marketing assistant there, where I learned so much. It was my first job really in the industry in marketing, and I just learned so much with them. They were quite a new company at the time, and it was also during COVID, so it was quite a difficult time for them. But I really just learned so much remotely, but a lot. And then slowly restrictions lifted, and I continued working with them, and got to work on some brilliant productions across the Board Gosh and the Kielty, and then I kind of started to think back to my French, and I thought, okay, if I'm going to ever kind of really look at my the language, it's kind of now or never. So I moved to Paris, and I lived there for 2 years, and during that time I was really not involved in the arts at all, and I really missed it. I was working as a project manager for a market research company that looked after kind of luxury brand clients, but now looking back, at the time I kind of panicked, and I thought, God, am I completely steering away from the arts that I love? But now looking back, it actually was such a time of growth for me, because I kind of just learned how to talk to people and chat to people and make friends and make connections, because I moved to the city and I didn't know anyone at all. I really just arrived kind of on a whim. And And so then, yes, I just really got to I built so much confidence in myself during that time, and kind of went back to the language and learned the language. And then following that time, I saw a job listing for the National Concert Hall, and I thought, oh my God, this really is kind of a dream job. I wasn't, probably in hindsight, I didn't feel like fully ready to leave Paris. I was still having a great time there, but I kind of thought, okay, like if it's for me, I'll apply for the job, and if it's for me, like it's meant to be. And I got the job, and then shortly moved back to Dublin, and have been loving working in the Concert Hall. And I think one of my favourite parts of the jobs, I work as marketing and PR executive predominantly with National Symphony Orchestra Ireland and NCH Choirs, which is kind of one of our new brand pillars. And so that's 3 choirs that are resident within the Concert Hall. And it's just, there's so much variety in the role. You know, a lot of the job is kind of you're at your desk, and you know, the job is look after offline marketing, and then also PR and like pitching to radio, TV, and journalists, like for print interviews. But kind of just the day-to-day can be so varied, and you also just get to work with such incredible people who are so passionate about the arts and communicating. And I think it's that whole thing of, you know, marketing, for so much it can be kind of, we can focus on the ticket sales, and so many times in meetings we're kind of looking at the sales and the numbers and the how many seats are sold, but it's also about communicating and telling the story of the experience that is experiencing orchestral music. And I think that's a part of it that I really, really love. When you talk about a typical day, kind of a lot of the time it can be, you know, at the desk, but then it also can be attending concerts, and I manage photography as well within the concert hall, so looking after photo shoots and headshots, or being at RT for interviews. And I just love that variety, and it kind of is something that I think when I started back at Boyle Arts Festival in the box office all those years ago, I think I would have thought, oh my God, this is the best job ever.
So did your time in Paris, I mean, obviously it was a time of growth, and you increased your confidence, and you said that you talked a lot to people, obviously in French too. But do you think that helped you land this job?
Completely.
You know, or in what way do you think?
I think so much of the job is working with people, and I can't do any, like, there's no part of my job that doesn't require me talking to people, whether it's talking to people externally or internally. Like, so much of the job is collaboration, and it's one of kind of the core values of the concert hall. It's that idea of collaboration, and kind of it's all working towards a shared vision of delivering this project. So I think, so yeah, even, you know, not knowing anyone in Paris when I arrived, I really kind of forced me to really put myself out there, and, you know, go to events and not know anybody, but just to kind of meet like-minded people and make friends. And even, like, I suppose the language barrier as well, you kind of quickly learn how to communicate. But I definitely think that it was really fundamental in my growth and my development.
And immediately, like, your project or your job is project based, do you see that long term, like the way Aisling has moved, you know, in different groups? Do you see that, or
within the concert hall?
or just in your role as music administrator? You know, not everybody is perhaps as lucky enough, you know, and you've earned your luck to land this position.
Yeah, for sure.
But I would imagine the job entails for many people going from position to position, or working for different groups for a certain amount of time, and then going to work with another company.
Completely.
Is that
yeah, and absolutely. Like, I think I've always said yes to kind of every opportunity that's kind of come my way. So so even, like, you know, working with Irish National Opera to then the concert hall, like, everything kind of, and again, when I was in Paris, I kind of started to panic that I was, you know, am I completely losing the arts career that I've been working towards? But definitely I kind of think that that I would always be open to more opportunity. I think there's a real blessing within the concert hall, and that it's a government funded organisation, so we're very protected where we are, and there's a lot of security within the concert hall. But there's always there's always opportunity. And I think also there's a real trend, you kind of, even within the concert hall and outside it, you see a lot more jobs coming up, and I think it's kind of it's when you're kind of looking for the jobs initially, it kind of feels like there's no jobs out there in the arts world, but there is, now that I'm kind of in the industry, I see more advertisements of jobs, I see more roles, and kind of see that trend and interest in cultural roles.
I might pause you
Yeah,
there,
absolutely.
because we'll come back to that, because I'm sure there are people in the room who would be really interested in what the steps are, that they might, you know, or your advice.
Yeah, absolutely.
But if I just include our next 2 speakers, if we come to you, Akash, next, as your very contrasting career, and you were on our MA in Creative Music Technologies. So would you like to tell us why you did that course? and what you hope to get out of it, and some of the stepping stones afterwards to your role as audio programmer.
Absolutely, yeah. Thanks very much for having me here. I am pretty honored to be here. Yeah.
Thank you.
As an audio programmer, most of my day is spent indoors, working away like a hermit. So any chance I get to get out of the house, I take it. So currently my job involves working in the technology aspect of music, trying to create musical software, applications, plugins, whatever they may be. They're mostly targeted towards musicians and other composers or producers of music. And I give them tools that they can use to enhance their workflow, be more creative with the usage of tools, and to produce unique effects and tone and sounds. But just to get started, I could probably talk about how I ended up here. Like a lot of people here, I suppose, I started off playing music when I was younger, and music was an integral part of who I was at that point in time. And over time, I slowly graduated to trying to record music. So I was technically inclined, as I always loved technology, and I tried to record pretty much my own music, really. And that's when I discovered the whole world of audio programs and technology, all of these flashy software that can actually transform your music and into really unique pieces of art that you can be proud of and be happy about. And at that point in time, I had a degree in computer science, and the computer science degree was sort of like an afterthought. I didn't really think about what I wanted to do with that degree, but I wanted to try and combine it with audio. And at that point in time, the softwares that I used were sort of these massive black boxes. I didn't really understand them, but I wanted to try and tinker around with them and see how they're built and what they look like from within. And so I was sort of laser focused in what I wanted to do later down the road, which was try and combine music and computer science into one stream. And Maynooth here, the program that was offered here, Creative Music Technologies, presented like the perfect opportunity for me. And I applied for it in 2016, and then and the program itself is quite broad and diverse. So on one end of the spectrum you had acoustics and critical listening and electroacoustic composition, and in the middle you had production, and at the other end of the spectrum you had the technical aspect of music, such as programming. I was more interested in the other end of the spectrum, but I was also quite keenly involved in the rest of it as well. And at that point in time, when I did enroll, it was only for 2 days a week that we had classes, because there were only 2 classes, I think, per week, which I thought was a lot less. I mean, I didn't really know what else to do with my time there, but then I realized that was actually quite perfect, because at the level of a master's program, you're not really fed information, you're pointed in a particular direction, and you have to try and reach that place with your own research and try to work out how to do certain things, and sort of bridge the gap between what you've learned and what you know, and sort of internalize these things. And all of that spare time was extremely productive for me in trying to upskill myself, so to speak. After my course here at Maynooth, once I finished, I didn't really have like a path forward in terms of how to get employed within the industry. I knew that the industry itself was quite niche, and there are not a lot of companies out there making plugins and software for audio products, and as far as I know, none based in Ireland that would actually employ me. So for a long time, I was very hesitant to even apply to companies elsewhere, because I was not confident in my own ability to maybe portray myself as a person who wanted to do this. So I spent a lot of time trying to build a portfolio, like a really strong portfolio of products that I can make myself, little projects that I've done myself, and with a general purpose programming job out that I did get eventually, that helped me sort of put a roof over my head. But behind the scenes, I was just basically working on these set of skills that I could be more employable within the industry. And in the end, it was a chance encounter with another person that landed me a job, my first job with audio programming. And at that point in time, I had enough of a skill set built up that I could, even though I didn't know everything about it, I could just dive in and really explore the world and sort of take my time and try to get into the world of audio programming. And since then, I haven't really looked back. And
Can I come in with a question? So Conor, I will come to you in a moment, and I will answer or open the floor to questions. But just listening to you, I can feel the attention on your trajectory. But being an international student outside the EU, and just listening to how you were weaving your path and not applying and building a portfolio, would you say it was difficult for you? In that position to actually gain employment, did that play into you building a portfolio?
I suppose getting employed within the audio industry is difficult as it is. It's just, it's not general. There's so many jobs out there, and the audio world is sort of small in its scope. Is what you generally think before you try to apply for it. For me, it was there was this extra barrier of employability, where because I was a foreign student, I was from South India originally, and because I'm a foreign student, I had to be sponsored by a company based in Ireland for work. So I would have to apply for a company, and they would have to sponsor my stay and and the job as well. And once I was sponsored, and I did get through a company with the skills that I had, which were completely unrelated to audio. I got sponsored, and after I was there for about 2 years on the critical skills visa, I was able to get another stamp on my passport saying that I could be self-employed, and that really opened up the avenue for me to get programming jobs as a contractor, or a freelancer, or as a sole trader with companies outside of Ireland. Really,
it's an amazing pathway.
Yeah. It took a bit of time, but I suppose you just have to
time and thought, and working out the different steps and this whole extra layer.
Yeah, and we were talking about it earlier as well. In retrospect, it looks like a clear path, but when you're actually there trying to apply for it, it looks all muddled.
It never feels like that on the inside. Sure, it doesn't. No matter. All of us have felt that. I have too. So Conor, in a way we come full circle on our panel, because you're both graduates of here and you're both working in academic positions, and like Aisling, felt as if you were just out of here and suddenly landed in this job, a 3-year contract post in UCD, which is amazing. So would you like to tell us something about your time here, and how you put yourself in a position that you actually were able to compete really seriously and successfully for this post so early in your career?
Well, I was here with Dean and graduated in 2018, I majored in musicology, did a thesis with Chris on John Williams. Liked it so much, I did a master's where I did a thesis with Chris on John Williams. Liked that so much, where I did a PhD where I did a thesis with Chris on John Williams. So I was consistent. And when I was doing all of that, I was teaching piano like all the time back home in Lucan. I would do private piano lessons, and I got a job in a school, so that kind of helped me keep financially afloat while I was doing postgraduate work. And when I did the PhD, I got funded by the Hume Scholarship, thankfully here, so I didn't have to pay for fees, but I kept up the piano work to, again, sustain myself. Antonia was head when I was doing the PhD and asked me once or twice if I'd do some tutorial work, which I thankfully said yes to again and again and again, as much as it was offered me. So while I was doing all of my research and my writing, I was teaching a lot all the time, first years and second years here, teens and kids at home on the piano, and I just developed a real appetite for teaching. So I knew kind of after the PhD, is like, okay, I'd like this. I'd like to do lecturing because I'd like to teach people who'd like to be taught, and I didn't want to do primary secondary school teaching because I wanted to teach what I was passionate about, which was John Williams. So, and I haven't got there yet, but I'm slowly getting there. But after I finished the PhD, I got a few occasional contracts in the UK, weirdly. So I was still able to do some tutorial work here after I submitted my PhD, and while I was doing tutorial work here for one semester, I also got a position in Oxford Brookes covering sabbatical, and I never thought I'd be someone who'd be able to like negotiate when I got a contract, but I was somehow able to convince them that I only need to teach every second week, and they reorganised the timetable that allowed me to visit Brookes 2 days every other week while I could still do some tutorial work here and still do some piano work at home. So like Barbara, I was juggling like 3 different jobs at once in a single week. Then after that, I finished the PhD about 2 years ago, and luckily Chris was going on sabbatical at the time, so I was able to step, I think literally the week after my Viva, I was able to cover Chris's teaching for a semester here. So I was, again, gradually accumulating experience. Then I was teaching a lot of film music and some first year classes and some master's classes with some students who I definitely see still here, which is good to see. And when I was doing that, I also got, somehow I managed to land a teaching fellowship with the University of Edinburgh. And again, I'm not a convincing speaker. I thought like navigating a contract, but I convinced them to let me work hybrid for a whole semester. So I was able to kind of do a little bit of hybrid work for Edinburgh while working here. And then I was intending to move over to Edinburgh after the summer that year, but then a few things happened that summer. One, Barbara actually offered me a job to teach theory at DCU, which didn't know whether to take or not because I was supposed to be moving to Edinburgh. And then I saw a position come up at UCD as a teaching fellow in music theory, and I wasn't going to apply for it. And then Adam Behan said, Conor, you should go for that. And I did, and I got past, they liked the CV and they liked the cover letter, and I was like, crap, okay, I have to do an interview now. And then I talked to Estelle, we met in Beetroot one day, and she was like, giving me all the theory tips. And somehow from conversations with her and from other people spurring me along, I was successful there. But like I never thought I would be a person teaching theory. I always liked theory. I loved theory. Doing my undergrad, I always thought I had like a music theory brain. I always thought in terms of the stave and chord construction and intervals. That's just how my brain navigated music. And I kind of did a lot of like small scale analysis and transcription in my thesis. So I kind of had been working towards this kind of unconsciously, really focused on film music and John Williams, but I was doing like lots of small scale analysis while I was doing that, which kind of made me comfortable approaching UCD. And then I think part of my actual distance from traditional music theory and my closeness to film musicology kind of must have been maybe my USP when I was applying to my unique selling point when I was applying to UCD, because I told them that, theory's great, but when I was doing theory in undergrad, I loved it in the classroom, but I had more fun applying it to the music that I was interested in outside of the classroom. And then I felt like if I could do that for the students in the class, that would be good. And yeah, they bought that. So when I'm teaching theory now, I followed up though. I'm doing Bach chorales, but I'm also doing bits of pop music and film music in it, and I'm getting them to compose for a string quartet, but I frame it as like a Bridgerton assignment where I give them a pop tune and they have to like adapt it. So I'm still doing all the theory things. I'm making them more interesting to me personally because that's the music that I enjoy, and I think for the students as well.
Yeah, because it's a very specialised type of teaching, to go from John Williams, to theory teaching.
Yeah, and believe me, John Williams still features in the theory classes very frequently as well. But again, this is like, I don't think I'd be good at it if I wasn't doing that. Because I'm bringing myself into it, and I feel like that makes me more engaging.
And you obviously are good at convincing people if you convince people to allow.
Somehow.
Perhaps the time, post-COVID played into that, where people were teaching remotely a little bit, do you think?
Yeah.
Or,
Well, maybe I think just something that made me more. I consider myself quite an introverted person, which is why I'm finding all this a lot sometimes. But when I was teaching piano, I just got so used to chatting to parents all the time, and that just gave me people skills a little bit. And then during COVID, I'd attend academic conferences. I have on my CV that I've done conferences in like Spain and the UK. I actually haven't. They've just all been in my attic at home, but they were during COVID, so I count them. They were hosted there. But I was chatting to people, again, from different institutions from all over the world, and that, again, people skills there helped a little bit. Yeah, I think it's just gradually, again, all those small scale things that I feel like you don't think they're going to add up to much, but they do in some weird way. The journey is never simple. It seems to be sporadic. I don't know where it's going currently. I'm halfway through my 3-year position, so I'm kind of trying to lay breadcrumbs and lay groundwork for where I'm going to go afterwards, because you kind of have to think of it strategically. I availed of these opportunities in Brooks and here and in Edinburgh and UCD when they presented themselves to me after some convincing by friends when I thought I wasn't able to do it, but now I'm realising I have to be a bit strategic and trying to create those opportunities for myself sometimes.
And in a way that's part of life. It's harder. Like I think the time from a PhD to first position is very challenging because you're all the time, I remember myself, thinking ahead.
Yeah.
You've only landed in one position, you think I'm only here for 2 years, you know, but even when you're in a position, then you're thinking of promotions, you know, so it takes quite a while. And anyway, the evolution of yourself and you know what you're interested in, that carries you along in your impetus. If we stay with this idea of, you know, employability, because I said I'd come back to you, Ruth, and then we'll start to take questions from the floor. Like, what advice, because you said that there were positions in music administration for people, so what advice would you give for anybody sitting here that is, you know, particularly curious in this pathway?
I think advice that I would give is that, I suppose, similar to what Conor was just saying, is that you don't realise that all these little things are adding up to experience, and that so many skills are so transferable as well, so that even if you're working a job and you feel that that's not relevant to the job that you know, the end goal, if it's in administration, things like, even, you know, I was talking to a colleague actually about this in advance, and she was saying, you know, there's so many people who freelance. I didn't personally freelance, but so many people freelance or get jobs in marketing, and again, it might not be necessarily in music or in the arts, but it could be for like a local business, and building like a portfolio and building the experience that transfers over so quickly. And I also think that in terms of like looking for jobs, it's about kind of being you kind of have to constantly be looking, I think, for those kind of jobs in the arts. They do pop up, and they're, you know, I remember when I was looking for these kind of jobs, you know, you're kind of scrolling through a lot of tech companies on Indeed, and you kind of feel like you're seeing the same job all the time. But like knowing where to look, like the Journal of Music, or, you know, kind of like even in the Constall, a job is advertised today, or, you know, there's like, they are popping up. And I do think one of my colleagues was telling me, you know, during like kind of there's a big cohort of colleagues who all started at the same time and have all worked in the Constall for a really long time, and they were saying that, you know, kind of post-COVID, you see such investment in culture and arts, and you're seeing a lot more roles being sanctioned. I suppose our jobs in the Constall are sanctioned by the government, so you're seeing more and more roles being sanctioned, and more, I suppose, like more of awareness as well of kind of the need of resources within those organisations. So I think my advice would be that they are out there. It's just kind of keep looking in. Also, I suppose, again, as I said previously, I think I kind of started to panic that if I wasn't in an arts organisation at all time, that I was falling behind. But again, skills are so transferable.
Yeah, and you're speaking of roles. Do you think they're contract posts? Because, you know, with Saoirse's archive, I've been aware of all different fields, and for archival students, you know, these contract posts come up all the time. 3 months, 6 months. It was an eye-opener to me, because like in Germany, you know, and in Vienna, master students can get those contract posts, but we don't typically have, or we didn't in the past have them. Do you think it's changing?
You do definitely see some contract roles, or even, you know, festivals, like, you know, festivals in Dublin or festivals around Ireland, you know, hiring someone for the period of the festival, or maybe the 6 months, in advance of the festival and post festival. So you do see those contract jobs definitely come up, and those freelance positions as well. And then obviously then the sanctioned with them, And I also think even there's way more jobs in the arts than I would have even anticipated, because I was looking for marketing and PR. But now that I'm in it, I see development or corporate roles, or learning and participation, more outreach work, or archive. There's way more jobs and roles within the organisations than I would have anticipated as well.
Yeah. So just take one question, and we take questions from the floor. Aisling, what advice would you give, for somebody who wanted to go into a performance career? Because you've had such a varied trajectory, and you to take up your last point of where you are now, that you were the management side of things, was something that was really interesting you. Do you have advice? Or?
Maybe a little bit, yeah. It's kind of a tricky question.
I know
it has to. You have to really want to do it. It has to. When you get an email to do a project, or you have to have that fire, excitement about doing it. First of all, the love of it. And then on the ground, I suppose you need to be easy to work with, a nice colleague that's worth everything. You need to be teachable and able to take constructive feedback and not take it personally, because it's hard. It is hard. You're going to get a lot of advice thrown at you, and to be teachable. And I would say if you wanted enough, just keep working hard for it and keep going. I think.
But what about the logistics of you going from one performance to the next, and asking to perform repertoire that mightn't necessarily be in your own repertoire?
That's true. I'm kind of niche consort. There are many singers doing what I do. There's an increasing number of us in Ireland. There's loads in London and quite a lot on the continent. So we're not opera singers, but we do, sing with professional choirs, do step out solos, organise our own recitals. So it's quite niche. Then in the industry, I'm around it a good while, and I am dealing with agents as the fixer for IBO. And there are a small number of singers who have agents and are all competing for the top level work of solos. And then I suppose underneath that there are many, many really good singers who have a lot to give, really interesting people. You're going to have to love it if you love the career, is what I would say. I have to think about it.
Yeah, but that's true, isn't it, of all of our panel? Do we have any questions from the floor? Would anybody like to ask a particular panellist or pose an open question? No burning questions yet. Barbara or Conor, one of the things that's often said when people do a PhD is that the challenge of a position, it's not to off-put people, because I've never had anybody who's done a PhD and regret it, but it is a challenge. Like if you train to be a doctor and you go into a specialism, you don't have to be creative at the end of that. You can have the expectation to work in that field. So do either of you have advice for someone doing a PhD who does hope to go into academic life, and how to navigate that realistically?
You have to just say yes to things, I think, as well. You have to kind of, and again, as I said before, I wasn't a type of person who, I'm not a confident person. I didn't think I'd get these jobs that I go for, and that's why a lot of the time I wasn't going to apply for them. And then I'd just chat about them with friends, and they'd say, what's the worst that can happen? If you apply, the worst that can happen is you say no. You might have wasted an hour or two of your life writing a cover letter, and that's it. But things do pop up. Maybe they're not always the plush, permanent, full-time jobs that everyone's looking for, but like enough stuff pops up. And there's enough like universities around Dublin where occasional stuff pops up that you just have to apply to as many times as it takes, I suppose, and just try and keep yourself in it and not losing sight of where you want to be at the end. So yes, I'm teaching theory right now, but I'm still setting aside a day or a day and a half a week so I can publish stuff on film music, and I'm not, again, like you said, you kind of have to know where you want to go afterwards. So I'm making sure that even though I'm doing one thing, I'm not losing sight of where I want to be. as well. So it's being clever with your time as
and
well.
it's also part of the life of an academic, isn't it?
That's it, exactly. I mean, you're talking about John Williams. Obviously, my PhD was on Roger Doyle's Babel. I'm still working on Roger Doyle's Babel, and I will be till the end of my career and probably afterwards, because there's always something that you can, particularly something that you've invested. Those years of your PhD are those kind of formative years where you really decide who it is you are as a researcher, and where it is in that, you know, that world of music that you want to, where you want to place your voice. But I agree with you, you say yes to those things. I think my advice would be to embrace the messiness of it. Which might seem a little bit flippant in a sense. Embrace the messiness, it's easy for her to say, but if you don't, then you spend too much time trying to decide whether I'll apply for this one or that one. Well, would that one be better? Apply for everything.
Yeah.
There is so much learning in applying for posts. Possibly the worst thing actually of applying for posts is coming second. Everybody will always tell you when you're the second person on the list. But you will always get the feedback, you will always learn something about yourself. The next time you go, you'll say, do you know what, I need to reframe that, or I need to change the narrative a little bit, or the focus of this time. And it's a difficult thing to do. You're putting yourself out there, and it's never easy to apply for a post. It's very challenging. But exactly as you're saying, even when you are at the point where you get the full-time position, it's like reset to zero. So from the day I started my full-time post, everything that had gone before was gone. It was reset to zero, and now this is me now. I have to start building from there. And you're thinking about the next thing, and you're thinking about how I present myself and build myself
and
there.
I think self-belief, you know, to get to that point, because even if you come second, which is wonderful, you know, or I think of positions that are opening up, and you know, typically there might be 50 people applying. I might not have 10, all of whom deserve the post, you know, and one person gets it. And trying to encourage the people who haven't got it, that they actually are really good.
Yeah.
They are really, really good, you know, and deserved that post, and to keep going in the belief that you will get something. You know, that is, I think, really challenging, because we're all competitive, you know, even if we're not fiercely so, we are within ourselves, you know, so there's a huge knock when you don't get a position like that, and that's part of the success, is actually keeping going through that knock. Dean, what advice would you give, like, to somebody who wants to compose for their living or perform?
On both sides,
advice?
on both sides. On the composing side, I'll take it from a media perspective, not a concert contemporary perspective. Be adaptable, and also don't be too precious towards your music to an extent. At the end of the day, in media composition, your job is to write for someone else. Your job isn't to write for yourself, essentially. You're writing for someone else's project, whether it's a film, a brief to go to a TV show, whatever it is. Doesn't mean you can't enjoy what you're writing, of course. If you don't enjoy it, you're not going to write something good regardless anyways. But it don't feel like you can't send something off because, I haven't touched up this tiny note here, this tiny note there. Something that you feel is maybe imperfect might be perfect for someone else. At the end of the day, your job is to write for them, it's not to write for yourself, realistically. And be easy to work with. You will never get hired in media composition if you're not easy to work with. Because again, you are usually working for other people and working within teams. And if a composer says, if a producer or someone says, I want your music to feel blue, you don't know what blue means, but you might as well try to figure out what blue means, because that's what they need done essentially with their music.
Just call the piece blue.
Yeah, call it blue, it might work, I'm not sure, but you have to remember not everyone is able to speak the same language as a musician. They aren't musicians, so that's where you have to be adaptable, and you have to be able to be easy to work with someone easily. Otherwise you won't get much work to begin with. And just enjoy yourself, enjoy writing. On the business side, find a niche. Find a niche that you enjoy, whether just kind of 3 pillars are in the music industry: publishing, records, and live. My job kind of spans across all the mainly records and publishing more than live, but my niche to begin with was publishing, and then that kind of got me into my job now. The exact role I do is extremely niche. I'm the only person in Ireland that does it, essentially, so it is a very, very niche job. It does exist in other places in bigger territories, but it is very niche. But I would say find something that you know you want to strive towards, but don't turn away other opportunities. At the end of the day, the career that I have now in rights and royalties, that wasn't the initial industry job I wanted. I wanted to work in music supervision and sync, because that's kind of the business side of composing essentially. But the royalties job came up. I was advised, here, this is your foot in the door, give it a try, see what you like, and navigate your journey from there, make connections, see what happens. I just turned into a rights and royalties nerd and kind of enjoyed that, and have stayed there since. I still enjoy the other parts, and I still do consultant work on the other parts on the side and stuff like that where I need to. But say yes to any opportunity you can get, just to get your foot in the door, and then figure out your path along the way.
Thank you so much. Akash, should we just let you have the final word? As you mentioned about at the beginning, living like a hermit, that your job entails this, so perhaps if you could round off, with the challenges of being a freelance audio software developer, and the challenges of working in a solitary way. I do too, in part, as a scholar. So I can imagine a little.
I quite like it.
Yes.
I like working in a solitary space. You get a lot of time to think about things. It's not a pressured work environment. So I quite like that style of work. But it's probably not a popular opinion amongst a lot of other people. But in terms of just getting into the industry, I want to say that as Dean mentioned, you want to try and find a niche, but audio programming itself is a niche, and so there are just not a lot of companies out there that are doing it. But then again, there are not a lot of programmers, developers out there either. So if you just can get into that space, then you'll likely end up, working in that space. And another aspect of technology, I suppose, is fluid and fast moving, and it changes quite often, and it's very hard to keep up with what the latest trend is. And I suppose trying to be a little fluid and accepting that whatever you've learned might not be applicable a little way down the road is I think a good way to sort of have having that perspective of just constantly trying to learn a little is great in my field of work. And I think learning things from first principles is just the fundamental way of learning things. I know there are loads of tools nowadays, with the advent of AI, that it can do a lot of things for us, but I think learning things from the first principles gives you dividends later on that you can reap, and that's pretty much it.
Yeah, so just on behalf of everyone, I want to thank each of you, Aisling and Dean and Conor, Akash, Ruth and Barbara, for giving up your time. This is a working day for you, and you've stepped outside it to come and talk to our students here, and we're really, really grateful. We have recorded today's session, and we will show it to you, but we hope to share that with our other students. It's our first week of term, and a lot of people I know will benefit from the advice and from your experience, because it is challenging. You've sat here in this room, and wondered what's next, and you've navigated all these steps about what's next, and they're the very questions. Even if people aren't going into your particular careers, I know that you give a lot of hope to our students and a lot of encouragement to keep going. So thank you very much to all of you, and thank you for coming, everyone. Thank you for colleagues for coming, because you have your careers and you're still
Always learning.
Yeah.
Always learning.